Yo.
Welcome to another Synfig tutorial, and in this one we will be taking a look at how to create a walk cycle in Synfig. Alright, so let's get started. So here I have my layers. Let me just show you how this is made up. Let me turn off these legs first. So I have a right leg that is made up of a foot, a lower leg, and the upper part of the leg, right? And I also have the left leg that is constructed pretty much the same way, okay? And I have a waist, a layer called waist. This is not really necessary, but it's just there, you know, to display that this is the lower part of the body. And I have one main rig that has bones that connects to each of the different parts of the legs. And I have a translate layer, which I got from going to new layer, transform, translate. And the reason why I added this is just so I could have something to move the overall shape here, okay, in case I needed to. All right, so that is my setup. So let's go ahead and begin the walk cycle. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn on the grid by clicking this and then go to canvas options, and I'm going to change the grid size to maybe 150 on both sides. So let me type that in, click apply, okay. And the reason why I added the grid is so that I could have some guides to know where the ground plane is for my legs, okay, or where I want to make the ground plane for my legs. So I'm just going to move this up above this line here. So now we can make this line the ground plane, right? So we know that the foot isn't supposed to fall beyond this line here. Okay, so the next step is to turn on the animate, and I'm going to go to the keyframes properties, and I'm going to delete the first keyframe because, you know, I always do. And I'm going to begin my animation at frame 1. You can begin at frame 0, it doesn't matter, but I like to start at frame 1. And before we begin, just to note, I'm going to be animating on twos, and what that means is that each pose will last for 2 frames, okay? And you'll see as I go along how that is done. So I'm just going to go here in my keyframes section here and change it from clamped to constant, okay? And then I'm going to click on the rig, and let's begin. So the first pose in a walk cycle is called the stride. Now the names that I use are far different from a lot of the tutorials that I've seen online, okay, but the poses are pretty much the same. But there are 4 main poses for a walk cycle, which I call stride, squash, crossover, and step, okay? So let me put this in the stride pose so you can know what that looks like. So I'm going to move this back a bit, move this forward, okay? So the stride pose is pretty much this, where you have one of the legs going back like this and one going forward like so. And I'm gonna move this forward a bit and then move this a bit back like so. So this is the stride pose, okay? Now when animating in Synfig, one thing to note is that you have to add keyframes for every single control point that you will be altering, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and press this button right here just to turn off the scale control points, because we won't be scaling the character here, okay? So yeah, so we have to make sure that we have a keyframe for each part that we'll be moving. So just to make sure, just click on, for example, I'm going to click on here and just press my left arrow key and then press right to move it back into place. And I'm going to pretty much do the same for this one here. We don't need to touch this one because we won't be using this, but we will be using this. So I'm just going to do the same. And I'm just going to click. So I'm clicking on it and just pressing my right arrow key and my left arrow key just to move it and then put it back into place, okay? So I'm going to do that pretty much with each of the points that I think that I will be using. So that is very important. If you don't do that, you will run into issues later on in the animation. Okay, so I have to go to my master layer now, and I'm going to add a keyframe for this by moving this down. So let me just move it down to the line here, and I'm gonna move this leg a bit up just so it comes above the line here. Okay, and actually let me bend this a bit more and move this forward like so. Okay, so we have our first pose. So that is looking good. Let me go over into the properties here, go over to the bones, and I'm gonna fold this upright like by clicking this drop down here. Okay, so that is the first pose. And remember, we are animating on 2s, so this pose is supposed to last for frame 1 and frame 2. So the next pose should begin on frame 3. Okay, and the next pose, as I said before, is called the squash. Okay, and again, these aren't necessarily the exact names. You will hear other people calling them something else in other tutorials, but you know, I call it squash. So, and the squash pose is basically the leg bending like so. So I don't want to do this too, put this too far. Let me take my time and move it up. Let me push this a little bit further. Okay. All right, and then now I'm going to go to my master and move this down a bit. And if I scrub back and forward, we can see what's happening there. Okay. And for this squash pose, I'm going to just move this a bit further and move this a bit to the left. Okay. And again, make sure that you have keyframe for each of the points that we will be using. So even if you aren't using them, just make sure you always go back to them and add keyframes, okay, before you move on. So just allow me to do that here before I continue. And yeah, I wish there was an easier way to do this, but inside of this current version of Synfig, there isn't, at least not that I know about. Okay, so we have the stride and then we have the squash. Okay. Actually, let me just sort of change this up a bit. Let me move this up and move this out, just to get some variation in the pose. Okay, so the next pose we have is called the crossover. Okay, so let me go 2 frames down. So this is on frame 3, 4, 5. And that pose pretty much looks like this. It's with one of the legs crossing over the other leg. Okay, so let's just make that pose quickly. I'm gonna move this back and move this forward like so. Just be careful not to click one of the control points that you aren't supposed to be clicking. So, and then I'm going to move this up a bit, rotate this. So this is what is called the crossover, when the leg is about to pass the other leg. And of course, I'm going to go to my my translate layer, which I've called the master, and I'm going to just move this up onto the line like so. So if we should take a look, we have stride, squash, stride, squash, crossover. Okay, and the final one is called the step. Okay, so let me go 2 frames down. So this is on frame 5. So let me go, well, frame 5, 6, 7. So go to frame 7 and put that final pose into place. The step pose. And that looks something like this. Okay, and let me move this back a bit, move this forward like so. Let me move this up. All right, so let's move, and let me just make sure that I have a keyframe for each of these. Okay, just making sure because I don't want to run into any issues. So let me just, okay, cool. So let me look at that. Okay, like so. I think I'm going to move this further, like so, a bit more, and move this back a bit. You can always go back to adjust your poses. Okay, yeah, and keep in mind that you can also turn on onion skin by pressing this button here to see what your previous frames are like. Okay, you can use that to aid you if you need to, but I'm not going to use that because I'm okay with what I'm doing here. So let me close this up. And okay, so with that being the final pose, we still have to come back to this pose here. But notice that this leg is supposed to pass this leg here, right? So when we move forward, and we're looking at the purple leg, right? So when we move forward, the pose after this is supposed to be this, but the only difference being is that this leg will now be in this pose and this leg will be in this pose. Okay, so what we can do is I'm going to come 2 frames down, so 7, 8, 9, and then we can duplicate this first keyframe and paste it here. And just a quick tip, if you should come in your timeline here and move your cursor over this area here and just press your mouse wheel or scroll your mouse wheel up or down, you're able to zoom in and out on the timeline. Okay, so I'm going to right click this and click duplicate, and here we have our pose. But if I scrub back and forward, we notice that it looks odd. And again, that's because we need to switch the legs. So this is supposed to be doing what this is doing, and this is supposed to be doing what this is doing. So let me just go ahead and make that change now, real quick. And of course, I'm going to move this leg forward and move this leg backwards. I think I'm gonna move this a bit more, like so. And we can always go back to the first frame to compare. So let me go and look. Okay, so first things first, we need to go to the master layer here, and I'm gonna go back here. We didn't have a keyframe for this, and we need to have a keyframe at each one of the different locations. So on frame 7 here, we have a keyframe. So we have to make sure we have one for this layer as well. And I think I'm just going to move this up a bit, like so. It's a quick adjustment, and then alter this just a tad bit, like so, and that is fine with me. So if let me just take a look. Okay, so it moves up slightly. Okay, so let's go back to this frame here, and now we can move this down. Well, actually we can duplicate the first frame, because remember the first frame has the drawing on top of the line here. So let me just right click and duplicate, and there we have it. And let me go back here just to look at the first frame, and then we can adjust what we need to adjust. Okay, I mean, it doesn't need to be perfectly in place, but you know, I'm trying to make it as close as possible. So if we look here, we can see that these are ahead of these, like so. So let me actually move this forward. Well, wait, let me undo that. I actually want to move this one forward, and all we're doing is just adjusting the pose. Okay, that's all we are doing. And for this one, let me move this a bit back, like so. Let me go back to the first pose to see. Okay, and I'm gonna move it back. Oops, let me move in small increments. And okay, so that looks okay to me. All right, so now we have one complete cycle here. Okay, and by no means is this perfect, because we can go in and we can see some issues here that we can fix. All right, but I'm gonna leave those and just complete the walk cycle. So when we are through with these poses, right, we will need to do the same poses that we did here over again for this leg. Let me explain what I mean. So the starting leg is this leg here, right? So if we follow the movements, right, we see it comes to, we have the stride pose, squash, crossover, and then the step, and then goes back to the stride, right? So this leg comes in front, so we'll need to do these same movements with each of these legs. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But we'll do this really quickly by just duplicating and then switching the legs around. Okay, so I'm gonna go 2 frames down, and so this one was a stride, so that's the first frame. So we're going to copy the second keyframe here, right click and duplicate. Okay, just to get that pose, and all we need to do is alter the poses. Okay, because remember, the legs needs to be switched. So let me just move this forward real quick, and then of course we can go back to the second frame, just to see if it matches up. So let me go back to the second frame here and see how that looks. Okay, well, we know that we have to go back to this layer that allows me to move it up and down, and I'm going to duplicate the second frame so it comes down, and then I'm going to go back to the rig, and let's see. Okay, so this leg needs to move down a bit here. Again, this doesn't have, I'm not going to make this spend any time trying to make it perfect. Okay, just want to get the walk cycle out of the way. Okay, this leg is bent a bit too much, so let me move this down and lower this like so. Okay, and this leg is a bit out further, so I'm gonna move this like so. Come back here. All right, I mean, that's close enough. Let me just spend some time to move this in a bit. Okay, and that's good enough for me. And let me close this up. Okay, so we have the stride, squash, and we know that we need the crossover again, which is the third one. And if you get confused on which one is which, you can just go over them to see. So we have stride, squash, crossover. So we just did the squash, so we need the crossover. So I'm gonna come 2 frames down and right click this, duplicate, and of course we need to switch the legs. All right, so let me just move this up a bit and move this down. All right, so it's all about posing now once you understand what you're doing. Okay, so and walk cycles take time, right? And you know, the thing is that it's very good to have an understanding of animation first, you know, like the principles of animation before you go ahead and do a walk cycle. Okay, so I actually recommend doing that. I actually recommend drawing the walk cycle first before you go ahead and, you know, try to rig it. But still, I'm creating this tutorial for those who don't have the patience to do that, but it is recommended that you do so. Okay, so let me just duplicate this and go back here. So let me just check to see what we're doing here. Okay, so these are a bit forward and these are a bit back. Okay, so I'm gonna push this a bit back like so. Okay, well, actually a bit forward. And go back here. So okay, so it's somewhere there. So I'm gonna move this a bit, then move this over a bit more like so. Okay, let me fix this and go back here. Okay, that is looking okay to me. So let's work on this leg now. So third, so it's like that. So I'm going to just move this out a bit and let's see what we have. Okay, and that's good enough for me. So we have the crossover, and now we need the step, right? And that is the fourth one, which is here. Okay, so I'm gonna come 2 frames down and I'm going to duplicate the fourth one here. So we have that going, and I'm just going to go to this this layer here and just duplicate the positioning of it. So duplicate. Okay, so we have everything set up, and of course switch the legs. So like so.
Yo, come on.
All right, so I'm sure by now you guys should have an understanding of how this works, and this takes patience, trust me, especially if you're using Synfig. All right, so just have patience, and you might not get it the first time, but you know, keep at it and eventually you will get it. Okay, patience is the key. So let me, okay, so we know that this needs to come back a bit more. Let me go back to what, frame 4. Okay, and we can still bring it back a bit more. So let me just bring that back by 1 frame, and let me go back here. Okay, that is fine. And then this leg now, I'm gonna move it up a bit, move this out, and move this forward a bit, like so. And let me go back here. Okay, so we can move this. See, I accidentally almost touched that one. Okay, so let me move this here. Let me go back here. Okay. Yeah, I mean, when you're doing this, you know, just put on some music or whatever it is that helps you to focus, and you know, just to get it done. Move this back a bit. Okay, and I think I'm fine with this. All right. Okay, so now our walk cycle is complete, and we don't need to add another stride because the next pose that comes after this should be this one here, right? See, this leg goes up and then it goes back to the first frame. Okay. All right. And again, this is by no means the best walk cycle, and I'm not. The goal wasn't to make it perfect. It was just to show you the different poses and show you how to do it within Synfig. So let's actually take a look at this to see what it looks like. And I'm going to reduce the number of frames that I have here. So this is frame 15. So I'm going to change this to 15. So we only have 15 frames. So it should come through all of these poses and then come back to frame 0 that will have this pose here. So but we want this to stay for 2 frames, right? So I'm going to change this to 16 so it lasts. So once it comes here, right, this pose should last another frame, and then now it comes back to this frame and then comes here. So bam. Well, actually let me go back to 15. Should I? Or well, I think I'm gonna move all of the frames to frame 0 to make this easier on me. So we can have that cycle going, okay? But we'll have to move all of these as well. And to easily move them, we can click on one, then hold down the control key to select all of these, okay? And then just drag them over to the left. And I'm going to do the same with these here. Just select these and then drag them over to the left like so. Okay, so we have that, and now we can do this. So this one will last 2 frames, so it should end here, which is frame 15. So I'm gonna go ahead and change that, and then it comes back to the first frame here. So let me turn on the loop and press Ctrl P to play. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, now it looks very horrible, right? So let's remember, this is not supposed to be perfect, right? But the reason why it looks super horrible is because we are working with a constant keyframe. So let's go ahead and change all of these frames by right-clicking and go to ease in, ease out, all right? So we're going to change all of these to ease in, ease out and see what that looks like. So right-click, ease in, ease out, rig, right-click, ease in, ease out, like so. And I know this tutorial is very long, but I hope you guys are staying with me. So Ctrl P, and there we have a walk cycle. All right, again, it's not perfect, but the character is walking. And if you wanted this to walk across the screen, you could just go to the top layer here. Well, actually, you could use the master. Let me stop this. Like so. Stop. Yeah, you could use the master layer here. And, well, I wouldn't recommend using the master layer here because we already have keyframes on this. So you can use the group layer here. Right, or you can create another group and place it in, and then what you could do is add keyframes to like the moving points. So you could just start it over here, add a keyframe there, and then come all the way over here and just move it over. Right, this is just a really quick example. Okay, so then the character would walk across the screen. Okay. All right, so that's it for this very lengthy tutorial. I hope you learned a lot. Well, I hope you learned how the basic poses of a walk cycle, and I hope that you'll be able to do it now on your own in Synfig. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial, and I will see you in the next one.